Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 7 of the Just an Excuse podcast, where the name is the game and the game is TTRP, and it's all the characters in between. I'm your host and the one with the need for the excuse. My name is Miguel Bloomberg, and I'm happy to have you back at my table. This episode, I'm continuing my expedition of, really filling out my TTRP Pokedex, as it were. I'm a part of a campaign that you've already heard of if you're up to date on your listening experience with the Just an Excuse podcast. The Ashes of Empire campaign. It's a campaign I've had the privilege to be a part of for the last, I think it's almost 2.5, pushing on 3 years now. And it's almost 100 sessions, by the way. I can't wait for that to happen. But it's been a privilege to be a part of. It's the same character that Adia is from, same character that Azalea is from, same character that Zamir is from. And now, as I continue to collect one after the other, I have the privilege of introducing another player and another character from that campaign. And I have the pleasure to introduce him now. His name is Garret, and I'm happy to have him here. Garret, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How's everything on your end, though?
I've been itching to get this episode out because, as we spoiler alert, as the campaign is coming to its soon close, I really think it'd be cool to get everyone on the podcast. And if I can spoil a potential wish of mine, I'd love to have an episode of the podcast with everybody on to do a sort of round table conclusion. I think that would be fun as fuck. But
it would be real fun.
I think it'd be really cool to do.
Yeah, we get everyone's perspective on how their interpretation of the campaign ended for them, based on their character's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. But spoilers for another time. For now, we're going to be focusing less grand, more granular. Today, we have the pleasure of discussing Garret's phenomenal character, the one, the only, Vinzt. Please enjoy the following audio show.
Hear your screams, hear your triumph. For tonight, we witness more than two fighters spar. Tonight, we watch the summation of two ways of life clash in the only real way that matters. And tonight, we shall see one yield to the other. One, your champion. The other, the champion of your enemy.
Vinzt let the words fade beneath the rising roar of the Colosseum. It was a strong speech, stirring even, but he already knew how it would end. That wasn't why he was here. This wasn't war. It was pageantry and profit. Craftworm's latest scheme, an open duel in the Colosseum, had worked better than expected. The crowd was packed, the coin would flow, and none of it really bothered Vinzt. What bothered him was the setup. Lately, his title, one he'd spent years hiding, was slipping into the open. Heir to the Khan. The company started using it almost immediately, marketing it, turning it into a selling point. Now the enemy had a face, and it was his. Vinzt scanned the stands, then looked up towards the podium where Adia stood, finishing her fiery call to arms. From that height, she couldn't see what he did. The crowd wasn't just excited. They were angry. The Khan had taken so much from them. For too long. And now a Khan stood in their arena, or close enough to one. Vinzt knew the role he'd been asked to play. He wasn't the Khan, but today he would be their villain. 20 paces across from him, the guard captain of the city stood stiffly, his hand resting near the massive three-headed flail on his hip. He was no stranger to combat, but this kind of combat, this stage, this spectacle, that was different. His eyes flickered from the crowd to the sand, then finally locked with Vinzt. There were no words, none would carry in the noise anyway, but the two didn't need to speak. There was a language older than words, a language written in the tension of muscle and steel, in the shifting of weight and the movement of eyes, the language of warriors. The captain's hand hovered, then closed around the hilt. There was a hesitation. Not fear, something closer to regret. An unspoken message in the movement.
This isn't personal, but I have to treat it like it is.
Vinzt gave the faintest nod. I know. I'll play my part. Vinzt drew the khopesh from his hip, and the crowd held its breath. Vinzt was the first to move. Flails could cleave through skin and bone and were next to impossible to parry, but they were short. Speed. That would be his advantage. He had to get in fast, stay tight, choke the swings before they could gather power. His opening strike was low and fast, an angled cut aimed to the abdomen, just under the armor, powered by his full body weight. But the captain moved, fast, faster than expected. He threw his weight back with a sudden jolt, just enough to slip clear, and the khopesh sliced the open air. Suddenly, Vince's deadly swing had left him overextended. The captain was quick to punish. Using his backward momentum, the flail came back and around in a brutal downward arc aimed to crush Vince's skull. Years of con training took over, and his body vanished from the flail's path. He tumbled past him, rolled, coming up crouched, then launched forward. He swapped the khopesh into a two-handed grip, swinging in a high arc, aiming for the back of the neck. But this time the captain didn't dodge. He gripped the flail like a dagger, pulling the chains across his body and pivoting to meet the strike. They caught the khopesh and knocked it wide. The entire exchange had taken 5 seconds, maybe less. But to Vinzt, it was enough. A full conversation in the old tongue, and the message was clear. He was at a disadvantage. Vinzt had hoped to overwhelm the captain. It was a tried and tested method. Against heavier weapons, mobility was key. Close the distance, stay inside the arc, press, pivot, strike. But if their speed was equal... The captain arched a brow, twirling the flail casually onto his shoulder with a smirk.
You thought I'd be slow? You're not the first to try that. Is this really all the con has to offer?
He flipped the khopesh from one hand to the other before dropping low, shifting his weight to the balls of his feet. Not bad, but that thing must be heavy.
Let's see how long you can keep up, old man.
What followed was an exchange so fast most of the crowd couldn't follow it. If their speed was equal, then it was now a game of endurance. Vinzt surged forward in a flurry of swipes and hooks, each one dodged or redirected with uncanny precision. He didn't relent. He pushed harder, faster, pouring everything he had into each strike, desperate to open the guard. When the flow came, he slipped past with pinpoint control, dodging left, backpedaling, rolling forward again, always re-engaging, always staying close. But the captain was a wall. No, he was a storm. Where others would have been overwhelmed, he flowed, twisting the flail's chains with balletic grace, turning impossible angles into moments of defense. The barbed head slammed into the khopesh or whipped the air beside it, creating just enough space to keep control. It was a showcase of two masters at the peak of their craft, the stalemate born of talent, tenacity, and sheer stubbornness. But Vinzt was starting to slow. The flail, damn thing, was everywhere at once, and even if it never hit him, he could never land what he needed. The captain ducked a swing and let the flail arc behind his back before bringing it around again. The strike's momentum made dodging impossible, so Vinzt twisted the khopesh, bringing the flat of the blade around to intercept. Steel met steel, and almost didn't hold. One of the flail's barbs was longer than the others. He watched it in slow motion, the first two heads colliding with the blade, and the third slipping just past, only to snag the neck of its chain. It was there, his opening. If he could catch the flail like that again, if he could trap it, he could turn this fight. Disarm him, turn it into a brawl, where fists and knees and grit mattered more than speed, where he had the edge. With what strength he had left, he launched forward one last time, blade low, telegraphed wide, an open cleave from below. The captain rose to meet it, raising the flail overhead, preparing to bring it down like a hammer. Vinzt planted his feet, shifted his weight, and at the last second, feinted. The upward slash twisted into a stab, not at the captain, but through the flail's chains. The captain's eye twitched, realizing what was happening, but it was too late. The khopesh's edge threaded between the links, catching them in midair. Vinzt twisted, then wrenched downward.
The flail tangled, its head whipping into each other in a flurry of steel and chain. Then he pulled. Both weapons hit the dirt in a geyser of sand. He'd done it. The Khopesh had caught the flail. But then he pulled again, and nothing moved. Vinzt felt that stone-like grit just before the flail surged. It wasn't the flail that dropped, it was the Khopesh. 3 heartbeats later, the captain stepped. The flail swung low and landed. Vinzt lay still, the sand soaked red beneath him. His vision swam. It was over. He looked up just in time to see the captain turn to the crowd, soaking in the moment, saluting the people, his people. Vinzt clenched his teeth. It was just pageantry. It shouldn't have mattered. He was nearly dead. But somewhere in him, somewhere deeper than pride or pain, something refused. So what if it was pageantry? So what if he lost? The man had landed a mighty blow. Today, he was the better fighter. But there was one thing, one lesson that all his experience hadn't taught him. With nothing but spite and a cracked grin, Vinzt forced himself to one knee. His ribs screamed, his stomach burned, but he rose. The captain turned to look upon the bleeding corpse that now stood before him with shocked eyes. Vinzt smiled through blood-red teeth, and the captain read the message plastered there. It's not over until I'm not breathing. The flail reared one final time, and Vinzt welcomed the dark it brought with it.
Okay, well, always have a good time making those, and I'm glad you had the chance to listen to it. That one was particularly fun. You gave me a fun thing to work with. A really cool moment, I will admit.
Yeah, it was one of, I think, out of this campaign, one of the most pivotal moments for my character.
Really? You think that was a pivotal moment?
Yeah, I do think so, because that's him fully accepting his background, basically. I know earlier instances where, I mean, with your character specifically, with your stepmother and all that, where he let his true name or his family name come out, but this is him finally stepping into the light of it.
Right.
As you would say.
That's right, with the ball. Damn, that's forever ago. Holy moly.
Okay. I know, I remember a lot of things.
You've got the elephant memory, man. I'm glad someone remembers it. I'm glad there's someone else to take notes, because I am bad at both of those things.
I'm really bad at the
You've seen my Among the Banners notes. You know how bad that shit is.
I do not understand how you kept it together. Like, I'm bad at note taking, and this isn't. I still think you're really good at taking notes for what it was, but that system, oh my god.
The notepad served me well.
Emphasis on the notepad like you wrote on a typewriter.
Okay. But all that aside, we may come back to this later, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty, shall we?
Yeah.
Garrett, what would you say inspired this character? Right? Like, as I've said before, stuff that inspires me is like music, or, there might be some concept from movies or whatnot. It all kind of comes together in some amalgamation of character. I remember I read somewhere there's no original ideas left, just interesting combinations. What would you say inspired you to make this character?
So what inspired me to make this character, and what inspires me to make most of my characters, is I will take bits and pieces of different media. I'll take a bits of, like, I like this song here, or I like this concept from this movie here. But specifically for Vinzt and any campaign that I'm in that has, especially for homebrew, because I've really only played homebrew, is if the DM gives me lore, gives me information, I like making something in their campaign. Like, what can I do to follow their, like, what they have built for the world, right?
So you like being kind of built in.
I like being built in, or I like taking, like, really cool concepts that someone else might not take in that campaign. It's a banana moment for this, I would say, for listeners and people who haven't really been in and on this campaign, is Vinzt is related to one of the BBEGs of this campaign. One of the final ones at that.
Oh, yeah.
So, well, related, more like forcibly adopted.
Yeah.
But
Continue.
I like making these, like, necessarily I might not be interested at first, but they expand as time goes on, as Vinzt has, because he's gone through 3 different iterations of character classes, because we started Vinzt
That's right.
all the way back in D&D 5e.
Mm-hmm.
And Vinzt was a part. Yes, and Vinzt was a part of the first group that came. He was part of the original core group, which included a wizard, a barbarian, which was himself, an artificer, a ranger, and a bard. So I looked at the lore. Gnolls in this campaign are part of a really tribal society, likes to fight a lot and all that. So I'm like, okay, let me make this really strong character that's a frontliner that can be there to interpose himself in front of the group, because we were kind of a squishy group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's
I'm
what I made.
having a flashback because I was like, Vinzt was a barbarian, and I had to like actually go back and think about it. It's like, holy shit, he was a barbarian, wasn't he?
Yeah, and
Wow.
how I made this character and what stuck with me, why I made barbarian his specific class choice in the beginning, was part of the lore is our DM changed how Rampage worked in it. So like Vinzt would, and in the beginning when it was like this, Vinzt would mow through swaths of enemies.
Oh yeah.
Just
He was a beast.
taking them down left and right. But as this progressed and how I tried to incorporate new things when we switched to Pathfinder is he became a fighter. He's coming more into his role of trying to still be at the front, but he's got to be more careful. There's more people in the group now. They had just lost someone and all that. But then we go to his final iteration, which is the commander class for Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not a fully dedicated frontliner or tank, but I give people extra actions. I'm directing them on the field as he has slowly grown from this person who doesn't want responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of his character conception was he's running away from responsibility.
Mm.
Or he's running away from something.
Okay. So we're going to come back to that in a second, because that is a really interesting connection into another question I want to ask. But so you had a bunch of inspirations that you came on, but what really seems to have guided it was you looked at the lore that our DM Fen came up with, and you saw an interesting angle in the kind of barbarian tribal. I think the Mongols is the closest approximation to what that culture is, and you thought it was interesting, and you decided to play off that. What gave you Vinz's what was the inspiration for like the kind of story of him, of his backstory? Because obviously that gives you an idea of where to like drop a miniature on the map. But what gave you the idea for his personality or his character archetype? And if you could please follow that up with giving me a character elevator pitch, just to describe, for our listeners what that looks like.
So when I try to create a character's personality, it's very much fluid until I come up with something that I want. Mm-hmm. And for Vinzt, it was sort of like, well, he's running away from something. I guess you can see with some of the other characters I make too. He's more confined to himself. He wants to shut the world out. Mm-hmm. But as we have gone through this campaign, especially with Adia, your character seems to bring out his more funny side, or shall I say, he wants to mess with people.
Yes.
Because his dynamic, and you've seen it in the campaign, his dynamic with the group compared to other people is very different. Mm-hmm. He doesn't like unknowns. He doesn't like opening himself up to more people than he wants to. So that's how I kind of picked his personality trait, was few people he can really trust. He's basically.
So you saw the way to develop a personality from the fact that, his backstory is spelled out this way. He's running away from responsibility. He has few people he can trust. And you kind of saw how that would shape a character at a base level. And then that was effectively how you took the character into the campaign. Obviously, as you mentioned, with the dynamic with other characters, he's changed. But that was how it kind of started in the beginning. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, because background lore for the con, it is not a safe place. It is not a kind place.
Awful.
It is an awful place. where might makes right, and even then, being strong doesn't cut it.
Yeah, exactly. I remember in the I write occasionally, and I remember I worked on I did just one night I got inspired. I worked on this like con piece, and it's actually what I repurposed for the con section of the Ashes of Empire episode of this show. But I just remember I was writing it. And I remember, like you were saying, like I think one of the first lines I used to describe the con was like, working in con territory is dangerous, even if you're on their side. Might makes right, and if there weren't any bad guys to prove it to, then they would prove it to themselves, to their allies, right? Like they'd kill each other, right?
Yeah.
And I remember that's just like such a perfect encapsulation of that group and culture. And I think it's the way it shapes Vinzt, or has shaped Vinzt and what he's running away from. It's really cool that can kind of inform the character, because you can be like, you know, a lot of times in fiction, when there is a running away from story, you know what I mean? There's an element of like, yeah, I know they have to be running away for sake of the narrative, but you know, why don't they just turn around, right? Like you'd think just turn around and face this thing. But at least in Vince's case, it feels like there's a really good reason for him to not want to be a part of that, right? Like the con is like there's a story of like a noble running away from his fortune or whatever. It's like, I don't want to be a part of that. And there's some part of us deep down where it's like, bro, shut up. Just get over yourself. Go back to your money. Like it's not that big of a deal. But at least in Vince's case, you can be like, yeah, he's, as much as it may be affecting him, maybe that personality part of him is causing him to suffer in some ways. You can really identify with like, yeah, that's a really horrible place to be. I get it. I understand why you're running away.
Yeah.
Could you give me that elevator pitch for Vinzt? I'd love to just, what does he look like? You know, if you saw him on the street, what's his vibe? What's his deal?
Vibe would be someone, he doesn't really want to interact with people he doesn't know, is the vibe that you would get from him, basically. But as a Null, he's on the larger side because they're a larger race in D&D. He stands about, I would say, 6'3", 6'4", with a lean swimmer's build. Still strong. He's got, you know, scars all over his face, a torn ear. I mean, we've got artwork from, shout out to someone else who's been on this podcast before.
Yeah, shout out to
Fabled
Brush.
We have artwork of it, and we've got one where he's just arms crossed and in formal attire, which he absolutely loathes.
He looks very happy in the art when he's in formal attire. He looks okay.
He looks happy, but he doesn't like it. And that's something we've talked about multiple times in this campaign as your character has dragged him into various fashionista places.
Yes. We will talk about that because it's one of my favorite things between the two of us. I'm so glad about that dynamic existing at all. So we will come back to it. But one other thing I want to lay out is, and like I said, you touched on this a little bit earlier. When you came into Vinzt, right, we've talked about, you know, where they came on the map, being built into the world, and then you kind of informed the personality of Vinzt based on the backstory and based on that location. But did you come into it with goals for the character in mind? Is that something you do with characters? Like, did you come in and go, okay, I built this character, I built this personality, here are his problems, and here's what I want to see him solve over the course of a story? Like, did you have an arc in mind? Did any of that come to you? Or do you approach campaigns with more of like, I'm going to see where this goes, and I'm going to see how they change over the course of the show? How did you approach them? Did you have any?
It's a little bit of a mixture of both. I will come with like very reluctant goals that can change at the drop of a hat, as long as I'm enjoying playing Vinzt and I'm doing something that not as a character would do, but as his personality would. But generally, when I come into campaigns, I do not have a set goal. I am there for the fun of it. I want to be able to enjoy it with other people and see how the story develops, sort of mentality. Now, it's changed a little bit here and there with discussions with Finn as a DM. But that's more like main storyline points that don't spoil anything or anything like that. We're like, okay, I guess I do have to pivot this way. Well, not like that. That's not a very good way to explain it or say. But he gives very. Oh wow, I don't know how to explain that.
Like, so it's just like there were times you maybe subtly shifted the character one way or another, like just because of the way the narrative was shaping itself, or did you like? Do you mean like you retooled the character in a larger way? Because it doesn't.
Subtle.
It's,
Not.
yeah,
I didn't retool it.
I was
just
gonna
subtle
say
shit.
because the if you did retool it in a major way, you played it off incredibly well. Everything about Vinzt has been very subtle and slow burning and consistent in a really great way. So whatever you've done, it has been played off very well. And at the same time, I think that slow pivoting is natural of characters, right? There are things that happen that kind of skew them one way or another, just as a natural part of playing a character in anything.
I think the only time, just for me, where I didn't pivot very well, and I thought I was being a little too over the top with Vince, was in some of our most recent sessions when he was unconscious on the boat due to me being unavailable due to storms and sickness.
Right.
So,
Well, I honestly thought it made sense at the time, at least to me.
it probably did. For me, I thought I could have done a little bit better.
Well, I mean, kudos to you, man. I thought you did a fine job. I mean, the character should be pissed off. Like, I mean, he's like, all this shit's happened. You're like, why is it happening to me? You know, it makes sense. Makes sense to me. So, kudos to you for that. Really quick one, and really fun one. I'd like to ask: where did the name come from? The title I get, but the name Vinzt, where did it come from? Are you a fantasy name random generator like myself?
Which fantasy name random?
Yes, there's another one of us.
There is, and it was the easiest way I could do it. We didn't have the names like Finn does in our most recent lore documents with some of the upcoming stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not going to spoil anything from that, but
yeah. Any hopes for the character going forward? Right. I mean, I know we're near the end, so I imagine that goal is pretty close at hand. But would you say there's anything really? I guess this is maybe we can go kind of large and short term, long term, short term. My dog is snoring. I don't know if you can hear that.
I heard the
That's my dog.
in the back.
Okay.
So,
I guess. Jeez, are you dying? Okay, pause. Okay, I think she's better now.
okay.
Well, we'll put a fun little beep in there to cover that up. That'll be a fun edit. Anyway, so yeah, any hopes for the character going forward? There's probably some that are very close on the horizon given the ending of the campaign coming up. But did you have goals, like long-term goals, even when you first made the character? Like, what are some
yes,
goals?
there was one long-term goal. And like I said earlier, he's running away from the problem, but I never wanted him to fully, divest himself from it.
Mm-hmm.
So his main goal for the end, I would say one of the two, is to defeat the Khan.
Mm-hmm.
That's
a big one.
That's the big one. The other one is to make sure that everyone that is with him leaves the city, or at least survives to the end of the campaign.
Mm. Just to keep everybody alive, thing like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he knows how difficult that last fight's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's going to be a big one. I'm looking forward to it. I know Finn has talked about how much of a big fight that last one was, but I imagine the Khan's still going to be a blowout.
yeah,
Yeah, it's going to be big.
that was also the more difficult one that we found out. But who knows? The next one might be even more difficult. I would
It
hope
all
so.
comes down to a dice roll, man. A couple bad dice rolls and an easy fight turns into a nightmare.
As long as good RP happens, good RP happens.
That's what I'm saying, man. That's what I'm saying. Okay. I think this is where we're gonna circle back towards I guess something that you brought up earlier about kind of dynamics and stuff. What have you learned about this character you didn't know before playing? I described an example I've used for my own character's sake in previous episodes, and I'll use it again. The whole thing with clothes, which has become such a big thing that we do. It's just, we dress up. Audio forces everyone to have nice clothes. That wasn't something I knew about the character going in at all. She was just this kind of rugged, vagabond, psycho character. But she had a noble background. And when she first got to the city and she got money in her pocket for her first time, I was like, what does she do? And I was like, oh, well, she kind of maybe this. I was like, wait, well, she has money. Is she prideful that she doesn't care? Or is she prideful that she does care? No, she does care. She cares a lot. She's going to spend all of her money on this shit. And suddenly a whole new branch to the character, flowchart was born. And it's been a really fun thing to explore going forward. So I wonder, are there any new flowchart branches in this character that you didn't know before playing him?
So there is one that was a maybe, and then one that happened just due to circumstances that just kept happening.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one was the whole menagerie of beasts that he had, or Naboo that he has at the current moment. That was sort of like a spur of the moment thing from the very first session 0 that had myself and a few other people in there who may or may not have been on this podcast yet. Who knows? Maybe they'll talk about it.
I'd like to hear about it.
But yeah, because it was CW's player character was involved with it in the very beginning. Coming in and be like, I am making this guild. What can you do and what can you offer? I can tame beasts. Excellent. You're hired.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
We're foreshadowing a dark figure.
Yes. I guess I'm training beasts now. And that was pretty fun. It was a very core, integral part of his character before Pathfinder and even after Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm.
And I will give kudos to Finn for the amount of work that he did to help make that system work that we created. That was
especially
while
in D&D.
Not that great, but it's something that didn't come up. But I was kind of hiding when he made it when we were in D&D, because a lot of the things that he said, overarching thing of this is souls have power in this campaign. They have a lot of power. If you trained an animal companion to a level 4 bond, or at least a level 3 campaign, I don't have the document pulled up, you could attune to it like a magical weapon and gain benefits from it. So we had the fire-breathing goat in the beginning, Leorsilla. If I got to max rank with that, I might have been able to have fire breath on a knoll or something.
That is cool. Oh, and bringing up Leorsilla. The good old days.
The good old days.
For sure, before she was stolen, by the way.
Yes, a lot of my stuff got stolen.
A lot of our stuff.
Or destroyed.
Yeah, those bastards.
Those bastards.
Bastards.
Which I had the unfortunate naming convention to name after the Drake that he has now, which I didn't realize and forgot about in our notes.
It's still funny.
But it's still funny. The other thing that popped up was the illustrious apron that your character's so-called gifted to him.
I did. For context to our listeners, it is an apron that says, she asked the DM if it existed. She didn't know if it was real. She just thought, what should I get for Vinzt that would be funny? And Vinzt is obviously this very stoic, no-nonsense character, but he also, along with the dark figure on the horizon that shall not be named, very good at cooking. And they consistently cooked in the mornings. I was like, she'll get him an apron. I was like, what if it was one of those funny aprons that said funny things? And so I asked Fenn if there was one. He told me there was. He told me what it said. And now Vinzt is the proud owner of an apron that says on the front, you can kiss the cook, but don't touch the buns.
And I think and what I'm getting at is he cooks often. Like, he got that apron, but over the course, and I will say this because it's come up in like passing or phrasing, very much Vinzt is a mother hen to everyone. Very much so.
Yeah, it's definitely come out of it.
Mm-hmm. Especially the times when he threw a spoon at you at the table.
That has happened, yeah, because Adia put her feet up on the table and wouldn't put them down.
Yeah.
Speaking of dynamic, I know we talked about this, and I'd really love to look into it. Did that dynamic I imagine that was something that just came about as through playing together. But did you have that sort of was that like a hidden character trait that was brought out, or did you think that was just sort of, you said, he could do this, and you played it anyway? That sort of, I don't know, sibling-esque combativeness, because he doesn't seem to take that attitude with almost anybody else.
No, it was something that popped up in the moment, and I was like, this is really interesting. I like this. I'm gonna keep doing this because it makes for fun moments. It also makes for very tense moments as well.
What do you mean by tense?
This is going way back still when we were in the D&D. When we took over the city, and you took Vinzt out to talk to him by himself. Like, you were explaining your whole backstory to him and everything. The meaning of being shackled while you still had your shackles.
Yeah. Geez, how far we've come.
How far we've come from besieging a city and taking it over to besieging a city and taking it over.
Yeah, doing the same thing again. But, so you're saying.
If it worked the first time, we could do it a second time.
But it caused tension when we were talking backstory?
Not that it created tension, that there was a tension that built up that was eased through this bond. Because it was your whole backstory that you kept hidden. That you probably wouldn't have told anybody else at the moment, but because you had developed this bond with the character, you were able to come clean with that person first. And such forth.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, yeah, Adia and Vinzt have developed a very interesting relationship. I think sibling is a fair way to put it.
Very much sibling.
There's this
very much
kind of stop poking me energy to the whole thing that Adia deliberately kind of pokes into to see how far the line is. That Vinzt definitely plays into. I think it's really fun. I've had a blast doing it. It's allowed me to express a side of her character that I am really glad I got a chance to. That sort of, like, she was an older sister for many years. And that tendency is, definitely something she stifled after what happened to her. But it was something that she kind of naturally fell back into when she got back with this group. And was just a really cool dynamic to bring kind of full circle with the character. This character who was in a rough place and devoted herself very deeply to family, was in many ways betrayed by that family, and then got out and was like, screw this, I'm never devoting myself to family again. I'm just going to be this hell on earth. No one will ever forget who I am. And then she was able to then find family again, and then, go back to doing that sort of that sisterly thing that she liked to do. And it's also interesting because she never had brothers. Or no, excuse me, she did have brothers. What am I saying? So, I don't know. She never had an older brother is the answer to that question. And Vinzt is definitely an older brother type, I think. Sort of mother henness that you mentioned.
It's like that, but it's funny because Vinzt is like several years younger than Adia.
He is?
It's like 24, 25.
Oh, fuck, that's right. Adia's in her 30s. Almost in her 30s.
Yeah, you're like 29 in the campaign.
Yeah, I think she started the campaign at like 27, 28. I wanted her to be a little bit older. Just because I thought that made sense for her character, being the sort of like failed noble. But yeah, it's a really cool dynamic, and I've had a blast playing it. And I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but if Vinzt, like in their childish endeavors, if Vinzt ever like pushed it, Audrey would back down. As funny as that sounds, right? Like if it's like she often winds up the losing end of that dynamic. Like she puts her feet up on the table, and Vinzt says, "Put it down." She goes, "Nah, you can't make me. I'm not gonna put her down." And then you throw the spoon at her, and she falls off the table, and she stops putting her feet on the table. Like I've deliberately been like, it's funny if she loses that encounter every time. I think it is hilarious, and I think in a recent one, you would like, Adia won't bite me, and goes, I might bite you, And then it kind of never went anywhere. But if you had challenged her, she would have backed out. She would have actually bit you.
It's the two longest jokes that you have with the character so far is you make fun of when Vinzt is wet, because I've made it a personal characteristic that he hates being wet.
A wet dog. All floppy.
It's like a wet dog. Yeah. And the second one is calling him fat when he's not.
Yeah. It's only because in your armor, you are a chunky figure. Vinzt is usually wearing a lot of armor. Do you know do you remember where that joke came from, by the way? I do.
No, not off the top of my head.
Okay, do you remember when, I think it was after we brought Kepri back, and she was recovering or something. I just remember she wasn't there. And the king's antiquator was like, hey, can you go into like the jungle and deal with these things that are a problem? It's like, remember it was like the bees versus the plants? That like encounter where we were sneaking through, trying to not get caught so we could like deal what we had to. And I remember there was a moment where like we were dashing from a bush to a bush and we had to roll a check and everyone passed except you. And it was like, it's going to turn and see him. And Adia goes, I roleplayed him, her grabbing you by the armor in an assist motion to just fucking pull you into the bush. And obviously you are way heavier than what she was expecting. So she manages to barely pull you into the bush and pass the check. And she just goes, you fat fuck, why are you so slow? She's just yelling at you. That's where that joke came from.
Yeah, dude. Pathfinder, he is just slow. And I'm also in armor now, so it makes sense. Because when Vinzt was a barbarian, he had no armor. He just had a big bonk stick to hit people with, and he was zooming across the map.
Oh, he was crazy in D&D days. Yeah, but good memories, man. I love that. And it's cool that something so small can be transferred into a kind of a long-term joke, because I think in a small way that kind of shows where the bonds of the characters are at that point, right? There can be, you can only have a recurring joke when there is enough real estate for the joke to come around again, if that makes sense. And I think it's really cool that the characters have built up enough of a bond where that joke can work, but can also has enough real estate to be shown more than once. And I think it's really, really cool. And kudos to you for playing along with it, because I know I know that role play is, in many instances, it's a give and take. You have to kind of present opportunities, and people have to take or not take them. And it's cool that in this campaign there are a lot of takers, and it's always resulted in cool things. So I've had a pleasure doing it.
It's one of the cool things that I like about this campaign. Is, I mean, we have our stereotypes in this campaign, but they're stereotypes that we've developed for the character.
Yeah.
But all the characters in this campaign are so dynamic in the way that they express their emotions. And especially how, like, the looming figure above us coming soon. Especially with how he handles speaking common. It's very much, I wouldn't say broken, but, like, off-putting or like non-threatening,
almost like
speaks,
stoic AI kind of uncanny valley level, I think.
Yeah, but enough to where it's charming.
Right.
Especially with the flashcards. God, those flashcards.
He hasn't used them much lately.
No, but that's more terrifying is the fact that he got more charismatic to not need them.
True. And I think that's something we'll talk with him about, because I think him along with you, because you were one of the original crew, have a little extra of that backstory of like where those cards came from, which is something that I as the character came in later. So that's something I know about.
I guess just blare a whole banana before this section.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm not going to explain any more on this because that's for him to discuss about.
That is a future episode, to be sure. Okay, had a lot of good talk about that. Let's take the conversation a few steps outward. Let's zoom out a little bit. Now, obviously, this is a little bit of a tricky question, so I'll present you a challenge. You do not have to meet it. What is this campaign about? If you had to answer it, bonus points if you can summarize it in a single sentence, or even more bonus points if you can summarize it in 4 words or less. What do you think this campaign is about? Like, what has been, I remember an answer I was told before was like, I don't know, a world with different gods or something like that. Like, what would you say?
Different ideals clash.
Different ideals clash. That's 3.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
So what do you mean by that?
So this is not something that as players we have really talked about. But the overarching thing is we have major banana moment. We have Tavar. These are different places within society, because Ashes of Empires is very much a campaign where society is pretty much fallen in most places, and there's different ideals everywhere. You can have these city-states that we have been mostly in the whole campaign, where you have 9 different cities ruled underneath one family, but they each have a different Mar, or king. So they have different ideals in each of those cities. You have Tavar, which is ruled by basically a western area.
Yeah, cowboy anarchy.
You have the elves, very, very different, very much not caring about what life is. You have the dwarves, which we know nothing about.
Yeah,
we don't know what their society is. They're out there somewhere. You have the religious ideology of the pirates.
Yeah.
Where they sell anything they can use for merchandise, which ties into your character, I believe.
Actually, not mine. Mine's with the monk cult down south, which is another culture.
Right, the monk cult, but there's something similar up. Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, like
me
you're saying,
misremembering.
There's Tavar, there's the city of the Pact. Like even, like just in terms of like geography, there's obviously the cities of the Pact, and then right next to it, that's Tavar. There's the Khan, what has become Khan territory above it, as they've slowly annexed more and more towards the cities. There's the pirate city that's up kind of northeast. It's kind of off to its own. And then down south, there's obviously Nebuchadnezzar, which is a sort of definitely magically endowed, kind of little brother elf society. Like they kind of value that level of purity and magic, but they're not the same level of establishment or all elf, as I guess the word would be put. And there's a lot of stuff going on. So you're right, it's a lot of different stuff going on.
Yeah, and that's the overarching one, and that's not talking about the Celestials, the Primists, or the demonic worshippers who are always fighting, because the Khan's forces worship demons, the Pact cities worship the primal gods or the elemental gods, and then you have the Celestials who come down and all that.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff clashing. Is that something you see in like our characters at all?
Not so much our characters. I see it more in how we interact with the world, though. Especially in the city that we're in. I mean, we snuck in with disguises, but immediately while we're trying to keep a low profile and just hide in the city, gather information, we're immediately clashing with another fruit seller.
Yeah.
So I mean, but it was fun.
Oh yeah.
So it's not like, it's just an interesting dynamic that I was able to see over the course of the campaign, where we're clashing all the time, but both forces either share the same ideal or don't have that same ideal.
So like seeing how it all mixes together. Yeah, it is really interesting. It's one of the things I talked to Finn about when I talked to him about the campaign in general, is how different every region is, or how different every region really feels. It's kind of difficult to describe, so I'll try my best. But when I've done world building in the past, and I've considered DMing, everyone's written down their dream setting like they DM for once or twice. And when I've done world building, I was always so obsessed with this idea that everything needs to feel like they're a little similar. right? Because, in theory, everything evolved from the same place. Everything comes from one place. So there should be, connections and through lines to each other where you can go, okay, these are 14 different regions and 3 different countries and 2 different kings. But in the end, it all used to be one thing. There was a creation story and we evolved from there. I was always obsessed with this idea that everything should, in some ways, feel the same, right? There should be connections. But I remember I had an epiphany, I think over the course of playing this campaign and just thinking about world building again, that if you were a new entity on, like, just this planet, dude, walking, like, 3 miles is enough to be like, how did this come about? Right? You go from state to state, you're looking at completely different, cultures and people and languages, and you go, how did this come from this? And then, God forbid, you go overseas. It's completely different. And it changed the way I thought of world building. And I was like, wow, so you really, even though there is technically a through line and you can see it if traced well enough, that doesn't mean they have to come out the other side visibly similar. They can be completely different and only have the most minute similarities. Because I remember thinking about it, right? You play some video games sometimes, and you'll start out in, like, the low-tech kind of rural region, and then all of a sudden you'll be fighting with, like, swords and whatever, and be like, oh, sword and shield combat. And then you'll, like, go across, like, a continent line, and suddenly you're in, like, cyberpunk. They're shooting high-tech weaponry, and you're like, how do we have swords, and they have cyberpunk, and we have none of that here? How does it make any sense? And sometimes it's really jarring. But in the way that Fennis does it, doesn't feel jarring at all. It feels more of like there has been they are realistic in that they are very different from each other as they are in the real world, but they're not jarring in the sense that you're walking across the border and your style of, like, combat changes, right? It feels different, but it makes sense. I think that's a really cool thing he did with the world.
Yeah, and I also got to give him his kudos for it as well, because it blends naturally. Like, it doesn't feel unnatural at all. And I've tried to create some things at first, and I've realized, like, the mistakes that I've made over it. And it's like, you can start a base outline of everything, but what you should really do, or what I have done, is I start small. Okay, this is where, if I ever have players for myself, they're going to start here, they're going to have things here, and there might be snippets here, but I'm going to corral you to this city until I see how everything goes for how I can develop farther out.
The urge to railroad is strong because we've got this good story for you,
It's not even just the railroad, it's that I want you to have fun in this city, and I'm basing your actions on how, like, everything else could have developed or will develop from that point on. It's like a flow chart, really, like with your character.
Yeah.
So, because the bane of every DM's existence is, hey DM, what's the character's name?
What's the character's name?
Or the instance when a player has a pet or something, and, like, the DM can flip it on, hey, what's its name? Tell me its name.
Yeah, what's his name? I remember naming Lyrisella. I do.
Yeah. I remember where Naboo's name came up, where it fit after a year and a half in real time of having the egg. The egg hatches, what's its name?
I didn't think of that.
I didn't think of that. What is all that? Yeah. There's fun little interesting dynamics you can have with your DM, or you can see where their inspiration comes from and see how well they've made things.
Yeah, it is really cool. Speaking of campaigns as a whole, do you have a favorite campaign moment thus far? I might know what it is already, but what's your answer?
Oh, my favorite campaign. Granted, my character got his ass fucking rolled. It would have to be after the incident where another player character, Kepri, had died when we went back to the city, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna fight in this arena. And you know what? I'm gonna fight the head guard of the city. And just that whole instance of where we're just fighting, he's letting his anger out basically through this, or trying to cope with what he can from his frustrations, and then just coming to terms with, like, the name that he has behind him, not to fully hide behind it anymore. And to freak out the crowd with, surviving a a critical hit from almost full HP that downed him in one hit. But
Yeah.
that was insane damage.
It was insane. What did you live on, like, less than 5? You had to be, like, right
So
at the edge.
my max HP at that point is when I was a fighter. And if I was still a fighter, I would have more HP than I have now.
Mm-hmm.
As a fighter, I had 87 hit points. He rolled, granted we found out afterwards that there was a miscalculation in the critical hit. He rolled 86 points of damage. I did not take 3 of it because it was vitality damage, but I lived on 4 HP.
Hoo-hoo.
And I went from max health to 4.
I was gonna say, because I remember you, like, it was either, like, even, or it was, like, you got some, like, decent hits in at the start.
At the start, I got decent hits. I think I got through at least 20 to 35% of his health.
Yeah, and I remember he was struggling at the beginning. Like, the first round of turns was, like, he missed a couple, you hit a couple. I don't know if he missed and you hit again, but I remember at least the second or third turn, he hit his crit, and it was just like...
He hit it, like, on 3rd or 4th.
Yeah.
And I was punching up, because this character was, like, at least 1 or 2 levels higher than my character.
And for context, in Pathfinder, that is a huge difference. Pathfinder leveling scaling is exponential compared to D&D.
Even at the same level, too, because you've got elites, you got regulars, and you got weaks.
Yeah, way different. Okay, so yeah, that was a great moment. Speaking of favorites, favorite NPC.
Probably. Oh, favorite NPC. Oh. Well, Vasilius has already been mentioned, so has Bosch, but I gotta choose a different one.
Yeah, gotta love. Basha is definitely great.
He. This little empire. So cute. Anyway.
He's definitely taken after He Who Shall Not Be Named.
Yeah. I will have to say, just based off the byplay that happens, Ranaket.
Ranaket. Ooh, that's your spy master, isn't he?
That's the spy master that wants Vinzt to defeat the Khan,
Yeah,
Banana.
Your benefactor, I guess.
Benefactor, who he really doesn't necessarily like, but
No.
when your allies are such sparse pickings, you gotta take what you can get.
Yeah. You've talked about a couple times when, like, making checks. It's like, is this something Vinzt was taught? I think that's a phrase you've used before. Was he the one doing the teaching? Is that why you have the bond that you do? Or is that just another unnamed, like, you were taught many things in the con?
It's a very mixture of things, because there's stuff that he knows, like his heraldry, like basic knowledge that he would have, Ranaket would have taught him.
Mm-hmm.
There was another major player in the con faction who was his, who he would have lived with was the Beastmaster, so that was his Beastmaster connection.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that really gets Adya going is his writing with the calligraphy and stuff. And
He's very pretty handwriting.
he has very pretty handwriting. He doesn't like people knowing that. He's very self-conscious about that. And it's been a byplay the whole campaign, because he's never showed anybody his journal besides that one time.
Mm-hmm.
And you immediately made fun of him.
Yes.
He was taught by... Yes. He was taught by another dragon. Spoiler, Ranaket is a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And this other dragon just was like, your handwriting's awful, I'm just going to teach you how to write. And then leave me alone, I don't like you.
Mm-hmm.
Your writing's abhorrent, it bothers me.
It's too good.
It's awful, I'm going to change that.
Oh, like when he first started teaching him. Oh, I
Yes.
see. Interesting. I can infer that his teaching experience was much more like knuckles on the ruler than,
Yes.
than it was nice. I can guess. There
Mhm.
must have been consequences for getting the spelling bee answers wrong.
Yeah, or this line was messed up, even though everything else is perfect. Yes. Because it's been kind of surprising with how Vinzt has interacted with the nobility when you have, especially with those of Draconic heritage.
Mm-hmm. And he's
And
definitely well trained, yeah.
Yeah, he's pulled stuff and they're like, what? Why does this strange-looking gnoll know all these things? Why does he know this?
It is a really cool side of that character that we get to see. Moving forward. I'll ask one additional question, and then I think we're going to move into another fun part of the show. I'm curious.
All right.
Do you think that... how do I want to phrase this? The Khan is not exactly a country, as, like, Tavar is. Like, Tavar, for example, is a setting that I thought, you know, when I talked to Finn about it, I was like, you know, we got to see a lot of places, but obviously the world's a big place, and a campaign naturally has a sort of natural lockout to what you can and can't see in the course of that campaign, because, you know, visiting every continent, every country in a world, you know, you'd be playing that campaign for forever. So just naturally over the course of how long a campaign can run, and our campaigns run extraordinarily long. Like, I'm very glad of how long our campaign has run. It's been a really cool thing to see characters actually not be forcibly exited. Not that like a 30-session campaign is bad, but like there's some things that can't really be explored or done justice through a short campaign like that. Like getting a campaign to nearly 100 sessions that we have is a real achievement, and we should be proud of it. But just naturally speaking to it. And so, like I've said, Tavar is a place where I always thought would be cool to go, and we've talked about it, and it's been within the realm of, like, doable in terms of how close it is, but it just hasn't come up, and it seems like it'll probably, the campaign will end, we won't have a chance to go there, which is a shame, and I know we're moving on from that going forward.
Yeah.
But it was one of the places I thought would be cool to explore. The Con, however, is another entity that I thought would be cool to see the culture of, to really invest in, but it's not really a country. It's a place, it's more a culture, a massive band of roaming Mongols that just sort of occupy places. There is no, like, Khan homeland, really.
There's not. I mean, there's one place specifically where everything is based out of, but other than that, it is roaming bands of murderers and or demonic worshippers.
Right. So, I mean, do you feel that maybe there's, like... Do you wish you could have been like... Oh, let's go back to... Because, like, for me, I love it when a character goes back home, right? It's just like, oh, they have to see all that stuff they saw again and really confront it and deal with their baggage, whatever it be. But unfortunately for Vinzt, it's not like he can go back home to his schoolhouse. Because, you know, it doesn't seem like something that's in the cards for him. Because, like you said, it's not really a country. Do you feel like there was that, just based on the way the character is, there was stuff you couldn't do? Or do you, like, regret that you couldn't go and do those things? Or do you think you like the way things played out just sort of naturally?
I like the way the things played out naturally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't rarely... Well, I say rarely to myself. Other people might not say that. Rarely do I get hung up on something that I kind of regretted in a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So it's... As long as it feels natural to the character and how they develop and doesn't, like... take out a person like, well, I thought the character did this, that, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't take out from the character in the campaign or the role play, I'm usually just going to roll with it.
You're just going to roll with it.
Yeah.
Cool. No, I think it's great. I think so much of the campaign is played out in a way where, you know, very rarely does it feel like we've been either shoehorned in a direction, or it feels like or at the very least, when we have had to make those slight turns to the wheel, there are good excuses for it. Like, they're like almost, I can genuinely think of 0 times where I've been like, yeah, we did that, but we more or less had to because of this. And I know realistically, if we'd played it out without that input, we wouldn't have done it. I feel like there's so few of those. There are like almost none of those instances. And every one of those, like I said, has a good reason for happening. And like I said, we've played a campaign that has run long enough that we can afford to have so few of those moments. Because I feel like in a campaign that's shorter, like 20, 30 sessions, there has to be some decisions that lead to a good enough conclusion to, you know, wrap up a campaign after 30 sessions. So I think it's really cool.
And sometimes that's due to, like, wow, my brain just did not want to work for that. Scheduling issues and or people have to do other things. So sometimes, I mean, it might leave a taste in someone's mouth, but at the end of the day, you still had your fun, and like, man, if we can come back to it, that's fine. If not, well, there's more stuff on the horizon that we can do as a group.
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
schedules align.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I wrote like a New Year's letter in the channel we're in, and I was just like, look, guys, Appreciate you guys. It's been really cool. Not just because we've got to play it for so long, but just because like getting people together for like once a week is a massive undertaking, right? You wouldn't think it'd be that big of a deal. Let's meet up to do this fun thing once a week. It's a nightmare to do. And it very rarely works out as well as it has for us. So the fact that we've gone this long is not just a testimony to how committed we are as players, how committed Fen is as a DM, but just how much we've been willing to invest and how much things have worked out well for us to go this long and go this far. I will never not be impressed by that, because, you know, most people you talk to when they talk about campaigns don't run that long. Like, to put it in perspective, we're probably going to finish above 100 episodes. For context, I'm pretty sure Critical Role's like campaigns that they've done, the longest they've gone is 130 or 140.
I think 140.
140. Okay. I don't even think Campaign 3 went that long. I think Campaign 3 is more like 100 and 120s. I don't think they went as far. But it's just, it shows how they are paid and they make money and they run a business, and they only made it to 140 before they came to natural conclusions and they ended the story. We're not paid. We're doing this for fun, and we've managed to make it this far. I find that really cool and really impressive. And this not talking down to campaigns that can't. It's more just an acknowledgement of how difficult it is to do. And I'm constantly impressed that we did.
And I also think what was more impressive besides our time constraints, is a lot of this campaign for Ashes of Empire started when a lot of us were still in college.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like these were like our junior and senior years. Like I had, for a good majority of last fall, like the 2024 fall, I was writing my thesis for my undergraduate degree.
The good old thesis days. I remember that. That was winter 2023 for me.
Dude, I had 8 weeks of research and 8 weeks to write a 20-page paper.
Jeez.
So, and it was a good paper. I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to give credit to people who like can make this time commitment. Like they're taking time out of a day where they could be. Well, this could be relaxing to people. I find it quite relaxing because I get to hang out with all these cool people that I never knew before, and sometimes I've never seen their faces.
Mm-hmm.
So, the anonymity of online gaming.
Mm-hmm.
But
our parents told us to stay away from this, and look how it turned out, Mom. Look at all these strangers I've met. Look at all these strangers I've met.
Yeah. So you have to give credit to where credit is due, where people can make these time commitments and hang out with people that like, I like this kind of group. I'm going to stay with it.
Yeah. And that's another element of it that's random, right? How often do you meet random groups of people where everyone gets along enough and clicks well enough to go the long term? Because God knows how many random groups you've gotten into, in person or not, that just like haven't worked. You know, how much random crap had to align for this to work out as well as it did is, you know.
Yeah.
Always.
And especially with new people coming in or old players coming back, meeting new people.
Yeah. So yeah, we're all awesome is the takeaway from that. But
we're all awesome, and I love every single one of you guys. You can't see it, but in front of my microphone, there's a thumbs up.
Let's go. Thumbs up, baby. So, this has been a lovely conversation. We're not quite done with it, but I'd like to pivot us into a fun segment of the show I'm currently still calling Character Telephone. Garret, I'm going to have to put you on hold here, but I am going to call you back in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Hello. I'm looking for what is it? Was it Silver Sands or Heir to the Khan? I don't know. I believe his name is Vinzt. Hello. Is Vinzt there?
Great, another voice in my head.
Do you have many of those?
Unfortunately.
Well, for me, this is just a telephone. Hello there. My name is Miguel Bloomberg. I'm with the Just an Excuse podcast. How are you? How are you doing this afternoon, Eve? Are you busy?
No, not at the current moment.
Fantastic. So I have some
watching
questions.
The smoke of the fires disappear.
That sure sounds interesting, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. I have some questions for you, and if you don't mind asking, you seem fairly comfortable with voices in your head. I wouldn't mind if you get some answers out of you. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. Some fun ones to open us up. what is the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? Intentionally or otherwise?
Drinking fermented horse milk.
Fermented what?
Fermented horse milk. Sort of a delicacy up in Khan territory. Not my favorite thing.
Is that like alcohol?
A little bit, yeah.
That sounds horrible and awesome at the same time. What's one lie you tell all the time?
That everything's alright.
Oh, that's so depressing. Come on, there's gotta be some other lie. That's a lie you tell yourself. What's a lie you tell other people?
Adia, your dress looks nice. I'm kidding, it's more that I lie to her about how her dress looks. Or if she asks if she's ugly, and I will reply yes. Little banter between two characters.
Think Adia looks ugly. I'll be sure to tell her about that when I call her next. Going forward, let's say you have 5 seconds to grab something before running for your life. What do you take? Is it a weapon, a keepsake? What do you grab in that scenario?
Probably my sword.
More utility-based, not so much emotional.
You could say utility, I'll say emotional.
You find emotional connection with your weapons, then?
I find that it can protect myself.
And therefore protect your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
As you clearly wear them on your sleeve. You strike me as a very emotional person.
Only to those I'm close.
We're not close. I'm in your head. I'm very close.
Different kind of close.
Shame. If you could duel anyone, past or present, who would it be and why?
That is... maybe Zamir?
Zamir? Really? I believe I've spoken to him previously. He's a very interesting character. Would you want to fight at his current would you like to fight him now as he currently exists, or some other version?
As he currently exists now.
Very interesting. Okay. Wants to fight Zamir, thinks he could kick his ass. Notes for later.
Hold up.
If you had to fight a copy of yourself, what's the best way to take you down?
Relentlessly beating him.
That's it?
I can live a lot of things.
Is there some special weakness, no kryptonite for you?
Target his friends.
Target his friends. A man of the people, then. Let's move away from these morbid topics. Let's talk about something a little more fun. What's the worst first impression you've ever made?
Probably to a group of investors.
Did you scare them? Or did you woe them with
Unfortunately.
your poetic ability?
Evidently, having a big null at a table does not endear him to many people.
Biggest guilty pleasure?
I like cooking.
Cooking, really? How did you come across that hobby?
Wanting to feed people.
You're very matter of fact.
I try to be. Especially to those who I don't know and these random voices inside my head. I treat you no different than Renaket.
I don't know who that is, just for saying sake, but interesting to know that you have many voices in your head. In my time, that's a diagnosed disease. Going forward, one more fun question at least. You wake up with an extra limb. What's your first reaction?
have an extra limb?
An extra arm or an extra leg or something. It can come out of your head, your side, your ass, whatever.
Probably a freak out. That's not something that should be there. I like my 2 arms and my 2 legs. I don't need another one.
Good. 2 more questions for you. If you had a narrator, if your life had a narrator, what kind of voice would they have? Would it be funny? Would it be silly? Would it be seductive? Would it be intense? What would it be? I am looking for a new job, as an aside.
That's good to know, I guess. Probably. Someone who can sound boisterous, but sad.
Boisterous but sad. Last one before we're finished here. You've been an excellent sport. You and your closest companions are forced to duel for reasons that cannot be escaped. Who is your biggest problem? And who lasts the longest? Who's the last one standing?
The last one standing by virtue of distance would probably be Reverie. And also the biggest problem.
You think Reverie is the biggest problem?
Yes. Someone who can shoot pretty much anywhere with a dead set accuracy. I've seen the men do it. Kind of terrifying, really.
And what about the rest of the party?
Probably have a hard time with Zamir and Craftworm.
Everyone else is easy then.
Easier than that. They all have things that they can use against me. Nadia with her lightning. Azalea with her spells.
True. So, you think you wouldn't win?
No, not if they work together.
What if it's everyone against themselves? Free for all.
I think I can be in the middle of the pack, maybe top, but I don't think I would win.
It's a very earnest assessment, I guess. For a man who's not very trusting, you're being very earnest.
Well, evidently I won't remember this conversation from what I got from you. What's more to tell?
Well, you are right. You will not remember this conversation, but I certainly will, and it's been a lovely time. I do hope you enjoy yourself, Vinzt. Goodbye. Garret, I appreciate you being so patient. Welcome back to the show. I hope you didn't mind being put in the void for so long.
No, I got soup.
No, he got
It's good soup.
Good soup. Last section of the show, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the players themselves. I find that's a interesting meta-narrative that doesn't really come about very often. It's just a fun chance to talk about you. Very briefly, what is your experience with D&D or TTRPGs in general? How long have you been playing?
So, tentatively, I can say I've been playing since 2018, 2019. But I really started playing with this group, I would say, around 2021, 2020.
And is that exclusively this campaign, or when you say this group, do you just mean like this server, this friend group of people?
Like these, like the people who we're playing with now, like Finn, Logan, all these other players. But if we're starting when I started, he might have already explained it, or maybe a callback to one of your earlier episodes. I think episode 2 with Jared. I was in that first group that he DM'd with his brother, my brother, and myself.
Right.
So he sort of got me into it, you would say, because he was a big Critical Role fan. Still is, I would say. But, yeah.
Cool.
I very much like these TRPGs.
Yeah.
We have to say
TTRPG now because we don't just play D&D. D&D has kind of culturally sort of become a catch-all for tabletop games, as for better or for worse, because that's what most like mainstream think of when they think of the game. But there's Pathfinder and there's Mask and there's all these other systems. So
yeah, I know. Currently, of the games that I've played Pathfinder, D&D, Vampire the Masquerade, and as of this past weekend, Mothership. That was terrifying.
Yeah. Was that fun?
I was terrified. I was in the Vinzt alone and survived.
So, fun fact about Mothership, which is totally unrelated, but TJ first got it, and I think he used me and a friend of mine as like a dummy test of like running Mothership, and it was really fun and it was horrifying. But I remember he was like, "Hey, we're doing Mothership," and I went like, "Oh, that sounds familiar." And then like approaching the session, I was like, "Hey," I DM'd him. I was like, "Hey, is this like what we've played before? Does that not like ruin the game for me because I know what's coming?" And he goes, "Oh crap, it might." So, I figured I'd let you guys experience it firsthand, and it is a blast.
Well, we never went into the mines. We only stayed up in the main room.
Honestly, we didn't either. Looking back, we were like horrible. My character was really no nonsense and just wanted to like deliver the package and not do anything else, and then was forced to do it. So he didn't really explore as much as he could have. But it wound up being some mad dash, and as a surprise, no one survived in the end. Did anyone survive in the end for you?
Pretty much every player character and 4 of the miners survived. With all of the character, and we're doing air quotes, player character survived. No, I got infected with the goo.
You were melting, were you?
At the end, because for that whole session, I had tiptoed the line of, am I gonna die or am I not gonna die? The whole time. So.
Totally side tangents, but I just thought it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking to you as a player, and again, I'm not asking you to self-report yourself here, just asking for an interesting answer. What's your biggest pet peeve as a player? And I know that might kind of change depending on in person or out of person. What would you think that is, right? Like for me, it's I'm very aware, like, we've talked a lot about like the difficulty of scheduling and committing time to this sort of thing. And for me, I have a very strong internal clock because of it, because I know how much time it takes. And, I am a roleplay junkie. I openly admit that. And if there's a great roleplay happening, I'm happy to grind the campaign to a halt to have that moment. But there are scenarios where, we're not really roleplaying anymore. We're just sort of discussing as a group, and we're not doing anything, where I kind of start to internally start tapping the watch on my wrist, because I want to keep the game going, because I don't want to spend an hour just debating on how to go knock on a door. That's my personal pet peeve, is I have very little patience when it comes to, that sort of thing. And that's a weakness of mine. I'm curious if you have one.
I think mine is, because you're always going to have a lot of people in a campaign, even if it's just 2 or 3 people or 4 players. No matter the group size, when you don't take other players, I won't say ideas or consider it, but like take in their own feelings of the game, for the matter. Like, I think, just when you play for yourself and not everyone else as a group is what gets me.
Just like being a little too much of kind of the main character and not really sharing the spotlight, sort of, in a sort of way. Or do you just mean like in the sense of like, as players, like the player may have a feeling about this thing and that being ignored in the course of the play?
It's sort of a mixture of both, where other players don't take into consideration what the group feels, or they feel like they need to be the center of attention, or they have to win the game.
Yeah, winning
is winning.
How do you
what it boils down to?
How do you even define that in a game like this? It does. I think that's the biggest misconception about D&D, or as TTRPGs in general, is, there are some ways in which you can quote unquote win, but it's not really how it works. As it is so difficult to describe to someone that you can win, but you shouldn't play to win, to like someone on the outside in. But it's like one of the most pivotal things to explain about Dungeons, about TTRPs in general, I feel like.
Yeah, and we haven't experienced it much, but the things that I kind of like seeing the most is when we actually fail or something, like completely just like sideswipes the character.
Yeah. And
Like
seeing
a
how the
character death
reactions
or
are.
like yeah.
Luckily, we haven't had many. Let's hope we, knock on wood, keep that.
Currently, yeah.
Yeah. We're kind of approaching the point where we might, so we're going to hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So, kind of tandem alongside of that, what would you say were your strengths and weaknesses as a player? Like, for me, as I mentioned previously, big roleplay junkie, happy to do that, ex-theater kid background. This is like my acting itch for the most part. But weaknesses, I'm a horrible combat player. I am very bad. I think we've had like 3 instances this campaign where I've been like, why is this way with my character? And either you or Logan have come up behind me and goes, yeah, that's not how that works. You've been doing it wrong the entire time. And I've been like, wait, what? That's how that works?
More so Logan than me. I'm just the one who's like, okay, it's because I'm keeping track of how things work or like how the combat has progressed. And this will flow into what I consider a strength of myself is also part of my weakness is I'm really bad at note taking. And always have, but I will remember things. Like I will remember things that have happened prior or like several months back, even if it's just a vague recollection.
It's a big word.
It's a big word, and I'm not good with big words. But like something that someone might not have written down in their notes, I will remember, oh, this is what, this was. Or I might not remember it fully, but someone else who has taken notes will know exactly where that moment is in time. And I consider myself having 2 big weaknesses. One with the notes. And this hasn't come up in this campaign because Vinzt is fully fleshed out. However, my other character, which I'm not going to spoil their name yet.
You may have another episode for him.
I have a hard time with new characters trying to get into a sense of rhythm with like the role play and all those things. And I have pivoted a little bit with the character. And this is where I consider my weakness. I don't feel like I do a good job pivoting the character or developing the character until farther along. And I feel like he falls behind in the aspects of role play with other characters.
So by like fall behind, you feel like he's... Because it's a fascinating word to use in a roleplay sense. Do you mean like he's like, as by fall behind, he's not keeping up in like terms of character progression, or like he's being left out? What do you mean by fall behind?
No, like by that I mean I am in the fact that I am falling behind in fleshing out the character. Like there are things there that I see that like I can interact with others, but I feel like I am slow to integrate him into like the group dynamics.
So you feel like it's you don't glue quite as quickly.
I don't glue quite as quickly with other people until there's like certain things that happen.
Until there are like good moments, like solid threshold moments where it's like, okay, now they are here. If that makes sense.
And as we progress in this campaign, I've slowly been grabbing onto those pieces and I've been wrenching them to myself. So, and because we've had those moments where we are now and right where we were before with the drinking tavern and then being in the wilds. Keeping these terms vague.
Right, for future episodes, true.
For future, yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, kudos to you in playing Vinzt. I feel like Vinzt has, he's definitely had his arc where he's been like more of like the not ignoring some of his inevitable return to responsibility bits. And he's obviously changed subtly as a character. He's definitely opened up, his interactions with Adia and many of the other crew, and becoming the kind of older brother, mother hen type character for the company is a really good example of some of the things that have come along for him. But I think it's really cool that with the way that you've played it and the way he's glued is so interesting because he provides a different level of connectivity. And if I can try and explain it, I think I'll use Adia for example. I have a tendency, especially with Adia was a really good example of it, to make characters that have a lot of volatility to them. And Adia is a very literal example of that. Other characters are also out of context for people who listen. other characters also probably have that through line. You've probably noticed that I like playing characters with a little bit of volatility to them. But what that winds up happening is that, by the end of the day, you look back and the character that has glued to the other characters, that has become a part of this family, is not the same character that started out. Like, that character had to change in order to glue. And I like those characters. They're fun. But one of the things I loved about Vinzt is while he has changed, he's not like he's a completely different person. He's just someone who he's a beautiful flower that rather than changing his colors, he revealed them. And it feels like he's sort of become this bedrock figure of the company, that rather than changing himself to glue, people have glued to him and people have glued to each other. And I really like that angle because it's naturally how I think stories go. There are characters who change and there are characters who reveal themselves and they glue differently. And I like the idea that not everyone in a party is just some deeply emotional wreck that is going through these deep turmoil events and then comes together at the end. But there are people who are solid and consistent and able to ground people. I think Vinzt is a very powerful grounding force for the company, and I think is a really cool testament to his character.
And I think that's where my mix-up is coming from, because a lot of the characters I play are very similar, but they're also very different. Because I kind of see the similarities between the current character and Vinzt, being that they can be serious and they grunt a lot. But again, where Vinzt has revealed himself, this character is going through change, like sometimes very spontaneous or like very difficult changes happening to his character, that it's so different compared to Vinzt. And I think that's where I'm finding a little trouble with the weaknesses. I can't find the correct speed I want to go at. I think that's the better weakness thing for it. Term for it.
All right, well, last question, and then we'll wrap up here. You've been a wonderful guest thus far. And this is a very general run. General question. Feel free to get flowery and poetic in your prose. Why do you love TTRPGs? What makes these games so amazing or special to you? If you had to put it in your own words, I'd like to ask everyone this as our closers.
I think why I like it so much is that I get to connect with different people. Like, even in person or online, as I've mainly done it through, is I get to connect with all these different people, and at the end of the day, while you might not become friends with them or you might not hang out with them outside of it past this like short campaign or one shot, you still got to meet new people, and you can decide if you want to stay in contact with them or not, or if they ignore you. But it's just being able to play with different people and meet new people.
Yeah, it's true. And it is cool, right? We talk about, going out and meeting new people, and we certainly shouldn't get rid of that. But it is cool the way that this method of meeting people, as you describe it, has this built-in sort of meet again next week thing for it, sometimes you meet people and you just sort of fall out because there's no reason to reconnect. But at least for these, we're going to meet again next week, we're going to do this again, and most of the time you want to say yes. So that's cool.
And sometimes we meet twice a week.
I know, sometimes we have more than once. Isn't that exciting?
Yes.
Well, Garret, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. I just want to say thank you. Like I said before, been an excellent guest, and I'll say something else I've said before. I know that this thing we do, this thing that I'm trying to do, is a shot in the dark. We've been friends for at least 2 years, 2.5, going good so far. But I know that asking people who even in person, asking them to come on and record themselves for a random project to then be thrown up on the internet, even as a passion project, is not something a lot of people are comfortable doing. And I appreciate you taking the time to take this risk with me very much so. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, this was an interesting experience. I've had to do some similar stuff like this before. Not that it's been posted online, but interviewing other people for classes and other things, like public speaking or what my degree was for. So, yeah, it's fun.
Well, I'm glad you had fun. And to everyone else, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have enjoyed. This has been a wonderful episode to record, with more coming on the horizon. I refuse to leave this show without getting at least 10 episodes deep, and I think we will get there. But in either case, thank you so much for coming. I hope you have enjoyed, and hope you have a wonderful next session.